Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Tailgate Talk. We're your hosts, David, Nick, and Joseph. Boys, side of the people.
Howdy.
Howdy.
Well, let's jump right into it. I think the big thing to talk about this week is we now finally have our first college football playoff rankings.
That we
So,
do.
Nick, and there it is. New format, first ever. Everything with the seeding. You get to see your first and second teams out and where everybody is.
It's a
College
beautiful thing.
football.
It is a beautiful thing. What are your guys' takeaways? Did you guys have any takeaways? For
The main one I saw was that the first team out was SMU. I think that kind of shows just the hierarchy of the Big Ten and the SEC going forward. Obviously, you're only seeing in these rankings, you got BYU in the Big 12, Miami in the ACC as the automatics, and then in the at-large, Boise State and Notre Dame. So four of the 12 teams are not in those two conferences. The rest are. Um, with the first team being out, being an undefeated ACC team, or no, not undefeated, but a one-loss ACC team to the number four overall seed. So that's what jumped out right away to me was that it does seem like, and this is mainly of importance to Clemson and Florida State fans because they're the ones that are trying to get out of the ACC and get to one of these power conferences. It's kind of proving their point, like, hey, we're not going to be able to realistically, our chances of getting into this thing go up dramatically if we're in the Big Ten or the SEC. So, um, I like that. I like the format. I think it's a great visual seeing this big of a team, but it is, or this big of a bracket, but it is telling that the Big Ten and the SEC combined for um 60 or I guess two-thirds. I was gonna list out that whole percentage, but two-thirds of the bracket is from two conferences. So that was my main takeaway.
now, off of that point, I will just kind of add that I think that is all going to work itself out. I know we all know that, but I think it's important to just remind ourselves that this is all going to work ourselves out, and often that the college football playoff rankings do change throughout the season. I think we've only had two national champions that were ranked number one in their respective years of the first overall bracket release. But I don't think Alabama is going to be there at the end of the year. Um, I I think a lot of seeding is going to work out when Ohio State plays Indiana, and I don't know. I could see an SMU team sneaking in here if they do run the table, or even if they lose in a conference title game, nail biter to Miami. I could still see them somehow getting in here as long as they run the regular season table. I think that's kind of something that I took away with them just being the first team out. Like it puts a lot of respect on SMU. I know that it doesn't put respect on the ACC, but they have them over a Texas A&M team that has, an SEC loss and a Notre Dame loss, who's a top 12 team in the country. So I think those were some of my takeaways. David, did you have anything?
I'm looking at BYU and Boise State right now. BYU clinging on to that final first week bye, being ranked ninth right now, and you got Boise State in the weeds there at 12. BYU, if they stub their toe somewhere, I mean, I'm trying to remember where the rest of the Big 12 was outside of that, and I don't think that I think that that's kind of pointed out. You can see Boise State get a bye if BYU loses a game.
Which would be
So
crazy because, especially now that Iowa State lost last week and Kansas State lost last week, those that whole conference all has, I believe, a loss. There's no BYU's the last undefeated in that conference. From what I remember.
Yeah.
So that could be very interesting too. Yeah, they could follow that 12 seed.
So the next, David, to answer your question, I think because you asked where the next Big 12 team was, right? Like I didn't just hear that. So the next Big 12 team is Iowa State at 17, and then you got a run of them with Kansas State, Colorado at 19 and 20. And then that those are the only Big 12 teams that are in the rankings. I'm looking at it. Washington State is sitting there at 7-1. They're 21st in the country.
They
Yeah,
don't get a conference.
they
They will
don't.
not have a
Okay.
They were saying to I was watching. They were saying that basically they would have to be an at-large team because they're not a
Gotcha.
Power Five or Power Four conference, which is very
being treated
interesting.
like Notre Dame.
Yes, essentially, it's like being an independent.
Okay. Well, yeah, then that there goes my next thought. I was like, what if Washington State ends up higher ranked than the Big 12 champ and that type of chaos would ensue. That would be kind of funny, but
I
I
also find
guess
it very interesting that the two seed in this whole rankings. I know it says it right there, but I find it very interesting that, and I know it's the format, but that the two seed in the rankings is the fifth seed going to play the 12 seed. Like for Boise State, that's a very bad matchup. That line has to be at least two touchdowns. It's going to be in Ohio. It's going to be in Columbus, Ohio. If this was the bracket at the end of the year. So I do not like that matchup for Boise State, and I just find it very interesting that they kind of got bumped down three spots here.
well it
I'm
that's where
sitting
the
here looking at it like Ohio State right now has to be loving their spot to host a first round against Boise State, and then you play BYU in the quarterfinals. Like that, I feel like that's a better road than if you were in the 9-8, 11-6, 10-7, where you've got to play either Oregon, Miami, or Georgia.
Yeah.
That's a big preference there. And then if you flip it around, if they were the one seed and Oregon was the five, then you're getting Indiana or Tennessee right now as your first game, as opposed to Boise State potentially or BYU, whoever. Like it's a very interesting spot to be that fifth seed right now. I think it's more and more going to be desirable because if more likely than not, you're probably like the two or the three overall ranked team, just with the way that the rankings are kind of or have worked historically. And so you're probably going to get that weakest Power Five or just top of the conference leaders in that regard.
definitely I mean at this point, to your point, Ohio State losing that game against Oregon might have been nice in the long run. Like obviously it's subject to change. It's the first weekend of November, and I guarantee you that I see at least two teams that I believe are not going to be there come final ranking time, maybe even three. But Ohio, like you said, David, they're set up perfectly. Like uh, taking a home game against a 12 seed and then going to BYU, who you feel like you should be favored by a touchdown. You can't actually. I don't even because quarterfinals aren't on campus, so that's a neutral site game.
Yeah,
So
no, that would be the Sugar Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, the Cotton
yeah, so
Bowl, and the Orange Bowl.
I think Ohio State is thanking God that they lost that game to Oregon right now. I mean, obviously subject to change, but that is the perfect setup for them to get to the semifinals realistically without having to break too much of sweat.
I also found it real interesting. This was my last thought on the entire thing, and I know it might be kind of off base, but I also find it interesting that a BYU team that's undefeated, even though they're projecting them to win their conference, like I'm trying to find a way to articulate it, but like essentially you're undefeated, and in the ranking side of things, you're still the nine seed. Like you are not a top five seed. They're clearly valuing losses as well as like if you lose to an Oregon, that's I feel like they're evaluating that as like a good loss essentially, which I think is interesting too. I think the only way BYU gets a top four spot in a bye is if they win their conference. And I just find that very interesting too. Like on the ranking side of things, not so much the bracket side, but for the ranking side of things, I think they're showing that they value good losses too, which is I feel like very, very new in the college football world as well.
Joe, just to be clear, the only way you can get a first round bye is if you win your conference.
Correct, correct. I'm sorry. It was more I was more talking about the bracket side of things though. Like you're at a 9 seed here and you're undefeated in your conference and in the country. Like you're not higher up as an undefeated. I thought that was interesting. Like I'm not saying I disagree. I'm just more playing like devil's advocate and pointing something out that I noticed. And I think undefeated, like back in the day, we would have seen them fly up the rankings because it was all about what you did. Even if you played nobody, it was about what you did and the wins that you had, not the wins you didn't have. You know what I mean?
Do you think that that's a good sign though for the future? Because it just means that we're going to keep getting these big games scheduled during the season. Like teams aren't going to be afraid to go out and schedule the marquee matchups. Like you got Clemson and LSU next year. Um,
That's
those
true.
types
I
of
didn't think
games
about
are
it
what
that way.
make the regular season fun. It's
Yes, I
just
agree.
like the so I do think that it's nice that a team can get a loss and they can play the big games and it's not going to mean as much to for the results that we just get good football. So
I mean, LSU is still in a really good position to win their conference.
mhm.
So there are a lot of teams that you do not see on this bracket or on this graphic right now that still have a path to make their conference championship game and win it.
Heck,
So
Colorado has a path. Texas Tech may have a path out of the Big 12.
Iowa State, I think, still has their path. Everything is wide open still.
And all that's for certain is that there is an elimination game in Baton Rouge this weekend. 100%.
Yes.
Yes,
And I
I
think
would
it
agree on that.
we've talked about that in previous weeks, but it's so nice having elimination games essentially or winner go home games. Like another one that I was looking at, and I know we're going to talk about it later. I'm going to talk about it later. Georgia Old Miss. That's essentially a winner go home game. Like and maybe not as much for Georgia, but definitely for Old Miss. And even if
Mhm.
Georgia loses that game, like that you're not putting yourself in a good position. You already have one loss. You could be sitting there with two losses and be an 11 seed like Alabama is right now. So that's going to be interesting too.
And Georgia, two losses would be in the conference. So I don't, with the way the SEC is this year, I don't think that's going to be enough to get into the championship game. So they're for sure at the best they're going to be in that 5 to 12
At large spot,
range,
yeah,
and then that's just playing an extra game. So
correct.
I
Georgia
mean,
needs to
I
win
think
this
the
week.
big concern that everyone had about the 12-team playoff was that it was going to devalue the regular
Right, and
season. And
it
I think,
doesn't.
yeah, based off of this, if this is what we're going to get year in and year out, especially with the way that expansion has happened and how divisions have kind of made it where it's brought back that that intrigue of now you've got, every team with one loss is in the same spot, and now you've got different secondary and tertiary tiebreakers. It just makes college football muddier in that respect, which just makes it more interesting. So
Yeah, for sure. It gives us
this has
something to
been a
talk about.
perfect storm for this first year.
Keep it at 12. I don't think there should be any more expansion after
No.
this. Any other thoughts before we head to picks, or because I know David
And
and I were originally
I want to do my loser of the week real quick, and
Go
it's
ahead.
my own Clemson Tigers. I'm just gonna bring it up right now. That was awful. That was
Oh,
gross. Hand up. That sucked. Um,
I take
yeah,
partial blame for
I'm
that.
I
So
yeah yeah Joe. If you ever pick Clemson again, I swear I'm going to sick my cousin on you, and she will forever give you bad juju. That is the goal. But first off, they didn't show up in the trenches. So what the hell? That's been our strength this whole season. And defensive line, nowhere to be seen. Offensive line, could not pass block, could not run block when needed. You guys got to get back to being mean because that was just awful. Uncharacteristic drops, uncharacteristic coaching gaffes of just what are you doing with time management? Um, from a program perspective, that all sucked. And the thing that really sucked the most was watching the fans throw trash onto the field because they were upset about the onside kick call. That is not how Clemson has been. I was utterly ashamed to watch that happen on my TV. I I have been I just I don't I'm honestly at a loss of words at this point of how to describe it other than not what Clemson's about and um I'm feverishly upset about it. So they need to do better, and this team better show up this week against Virginia Tech.
How much of the blame do you throw on Dabo? I'm just asking a question because I did not. I'm gonna be open. I was open and honest with you guys
Yeah,
before the
it
podcast, but
all starts and
I
finishes
didn't
with the
did
head
not watch it.
coach. It all starts and finishes with the head coach. You got to get your team up and ready to go. Those guys were not ready to play. They had a bye
And
week and they came off the bye week asleep and they were asleep the whole game. They did not wake up at all. So it is
I
a
was about
100% on the coaching staff.
I was about to say I'm putting all of the blame on the coaching staff because this is 3 years in a row that they've lost off of a bye week, and they just like David said they looked like they were just patty walk or patty caking whatever you want to say. They looked like pansies out there. It was terrible, and it was embarrassing to watch. It was embarrassing that they're starting to get some respect back on the national scene after a tough couple of years, and they lay an absolute egg against a team that had never beaten us in their program history before. And it's at home at a night game. You don't lose those games at Clemson, and it was terrible. Um, Not a fan of the fans throwing trash. We can thank Texas for setting that precedent. Um, just all around bad night.
And you got to also thank the NCAA for not doing their job and setting the law on that. That this should have been clear that if this happens, there are repercussions where you have either a penalty being enforced on the home team for throwing trash on the field and a fine, something to completely dissuade that type of reaction because it is one of the things that's truly awful about college football is when that happens. I mean, it's not the first time we've seen trash get thrown on the field this season. It's not the first time I've ever seen it at all. And every time I look at it, I call it trash, and I'm not a fan of it, and it needs to go.
Well, I think before Nick goes, I just have one quick line that I was always told: when you fail to enforce a rule, you just create new rules, and that's what the NCAA does often. They fail to enforce their own rules, so therefore you create new rules that exist. So I think that's just you're exactly right on every point you just hit.
I mean, we can
I'm
go
done with it.
on
Move
about
on.
how we can go on about how bad the NCAA is, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
just be better. Just be better. I wanted to get to the picks because I didn't want to talk about the game because it made me mad, but then I forgot about the trash. I was like, yeah, we need to talk about that.
Needs to be addressed. We can move on.
All right. Well, with that being said, I mean, my loser of the week was the exact same as David, so I got nothing else. So let's get to some picks. How about that?
My
Oh
shout
shoot.
out with this bracket. So
Um, I suck again. So, uh, I had a little glimmer of hope there. David, props to David. You
he's killing it
just
this year.
and
Give yourself a round
No,
of
well,
applause, Dave. I'm
yeah,
serious. He's genuinely doing well. I can't even
no,
catch him.
I almost have double the amount of wins as losses. Right? We're almost
Yeah,
there, boys.
yeah, you're one away. Yeah, it's crazy.
If I go
I feel
three
like
That's
and
every
one
fun.
this
week,
week,
every I feel
I
like every
officially
week,
double my wins compared to my losses.
I feel
So
like every week we look at the like we finish this podcast and I'm like, this is the week that David goes 0-4, and then David goes 4-0, and I'm like, what am I doing here? Like even if I had a 4-0 week, I'm still not catching you at this rate.
would you believe I have two 0 and 4 weeks?
I did not
Oh,
realize that.
no, you don't.
I have two 0 and 4 weeks
I believe one
this
and
season.
three, but I don't think all four.
I'm bad.
We're gonna have to ask our math budget to check the records on that one.
Yeah. But shout out David, killing it. He knows ball. Um, it just locks. Little payback, Joe. Notre Dame over Florida State. Either I'm going to get the win or Joe's going to get payback for what happened to us. And I think I'm
If
going to
we
get the
lose
win.
to Florida State,
I was
we
about to say
should
Florida
we
State
should
is
be relegated to Division Two. And I mean that from the very bottom of my heart because this Florida State team has been awful this year. So
And
Notre Dame needs
and
to wake up. We're coming off a bye ourselves, and we need to just do what we're supposed to do. Just do
Notre
what we're
Notre
supposed
Dame looked good last time they were out against Navy. Florida State, I think, is should be playing in high school. Um, I think 28 points by halftime. So give me the Irish.
Yeah, for me, Washington State, I like their offense. They're 7-1. I think they want to make a statement, especially after this latest ranking. So I'm going to use that as my motivation here. I think Wazoo gets it done minus 20.5 here for my lock.
All right, David, win number one.
Give me Pitt over UVA, 7.5 point spread. Pitt's been looking good. UVA's also been looking good, but I just feel like the Panthers defense is going to propel them here.
This is going to have to be a big get back game from Pitt. I mean, they got smoked by SMU. They got Clemson coming up in a couple weeks. They need to win this game if they want to have any outside shot at the ACC title game. So I don't hate this pick. I think Northeast is going to have the boys ready to go.
Go Panthers.
Pick 'em. Joe mentioned it earlier. This game is massive. Ole Miss is eliminated with a loss. Georgia is going to be very tough if they don't win this game. But I'm pretty sure I saw an injuries report with the almost the entire Ole Miss team on it. Um, I just I feel I know Carson Beck's been throwing more interceptions this year, but you got to feel good picking the dogs. So give me Georgia. I think they win this game pretty easily, and I'm still upset with Kirby for pushing a guy. So come on, Kirby.
Yeah, for me, I'm taking the same game, taking the same pick here. I think Georgia's really, really good. I don't think that just any old team can go out into the University of Texas and dominate them on the lines a few weeks ago. In the trenches, I think this team is good. I think Carson Beck is going to have a bounce back week, and I think that defense is going to be the highlight of this game. The Georgia defense is going to win them this game. So give me Georgia minus 2.5.
It was very hard to believe that the same team that went into Austin and won was the team that showed up to Jacksonville last week.
Yeah, but I'm thinking also because that was a ranked matchup and it was as hyped as it was. I'm thinking maybe this is a ranked matchup. Maybe that's my train of thought. I don't know. I thought about this for like
I think what you're
so.
finding this year is that Georgia is hot and cold. They are playing up and down to competition.
I know, but
And
that
that this is
defense.
not the worst thing that this is not the thing first time we've seen this. They did it similar last year. Like they when they need their A game, they'll pull out their A game, but you can
Correct.
catch
Yeah.
them sleeping this year.
Yes. But I think they pull out their A game here. And I think the defense more or less pulls out their A game because I don't really trust Beck, but I think he has to have a bounce back at some point. Right? He has to. You guys agree
At,
with that? I mean,
at
we're all
one
waiting
point,
for the other shoe to drop. He's not well right now, but he's got to get it together.
I mean, I wouldn't mind if they lost again.
You just
Especially
you're
this
like
week where it hurts
you're
both of
like the
you two.
Joker. You just want to watch the world burn now.
I do. I want the whole
not
world to
about the
burn.
money. It's about sending a message.
Yeah, it's not about the money, it's about sending the message, and here we go.
And I got these scars.
Oh
Here we go,
God.
Heath Ledger.
Well, you know how I'm gonna deliver some pain for you too with Navy over USF. Midshipmen have been playing like crazy. I think they need a bounce back after the did they play Notre Dame this past week? I think, or was it the week
No, two
That
before?
weeks
was two
ago.
weeks ago.
All right, well,
I
you know
think
what? That ruined so much of their hopes. This is their second bounce back week in a row for that. USF is not good. Why is it only a 3 point spread? Give me Navy.
it's actually down to 2.5. Oh, Navy lost to Rice last week.
Bad luck, bad luck. Go on, move on.
Upset, which is what I hope David will be after this week with his
Yes, me
picks.
too.
We talked about it. Another elimination game in Baton Rouge. I think that home atmosphere is going to be enough. I just now realized I picked Brian Kelly in a big game.
I stood away from that game for a reason. Because I almost picked LSU and then I remembered who the head coach was. And I was like, I've seen that movie too many times before.
I just can't get out of my own way. Anyway, I think that Alabama's been another team that's been hot and cold. Obviously, they lost to Vandy. Should have lost to South Carolina. Brian Kelly, take me home.
Oklahoma's really, really bad this year. I know Mizzou's not good either, but I'm gonna I'm gonna take Mizzou here. They're still ranked 24th in the country, and they're not favored. So I've been taking those teams all year whenever I can. It's gonna be the same thing here. Mizzou plus 2.5 as underdogs against a terrible Oklahoma team who just beat. They had two straight losses, and then they beat Maine, who I'm pretty sure is a Division 1 FCS
FCS
school,
team.
and they did not beat them by that. I mean, they beat them handily, but they didn't look like world beaters. So give me Mizzou here. I don't know why they are underdogs.
Nick, this may be your only saving grace is that I've like
Oh
LSU.
my God, you fell for the Brian Kelly trap too.
It's not bad. It's the Kalen DeBoer this year. Alabama has looked suspect, and LSU has been playing all right. They ever since I think they've had a big game already, and they won that one. Give
I
me
cannot believe
LSU
you.
here over Bama.
They also lost to USC, who just benched their starting quarterback. So
I cannot believe you two. You guys are falling for the same old trick.
You realize this is in Baton Rouge. It's not
I
in
don't
it's not in
care.
that's my
I do
saving
Tuscaloosa.
not
grace.
care. I do not care. It's Brian Kelly, buddy. Come on,
Yeah,
cuz.
but you know what, Joe? This is get back at Joe week. So give me LSU.
Yeah, watch. Notre Dame's gonna lose and Brian Kelly's gonna win this game. I'm gonna lose my
And I'm gonna laugh.
gosh darn mind.
I wouldn't. I'd be going 1-1.
But the memes, Nick. But the memes.
I mean, I'm already screwed. Might as well. Um, Over under. I originally had a pick of the Florida game because I thought Lagway died. Turns out I think he might be playing, so I had to audible there. I went with the Holy War, BYU Utah. Going back to my roots, BYU's offense has been scoring like 35, 38 a game. Utah hasn't, but rivalry game, I'm thinking that it's going to be a high scoring affair because that's how rivalry games should be. Uh, and I got to pick a game with Utah in it. So over four, give me 41 points. I just need 6 touchdowns, boys. Holy War.
When this becomes a 13-10 game, I'm gonna laugh.
All right,
Yeah,
moving
I
on.
I don't know about that one. Um, I like Miami Georgia Tech here. This game I feel like is always like drunk. As David likes to say about games, I feel like this game is always drunk. So, I think Miami always is going to throw up a bunch of points at the end and throw and say Cam Ward, go get it for us, go save the game. So, give me the over 63.5. It's high, but I like it. I like it a lot. My gut's telling me something here.
And for David's ugly game of the week, give me West Virginia, Cincinnati. 56.5 is too many points. Nah, they're getting nowhere near that. Give me the under.
I cannot. I can't believe you guys fell for the Brian Kelly trap. I don't know. I don't know. I thought I knew what you guys were thinking, and I clearly do not. I clearly do not.
I
I
mean, I've had this
completely.
pick in since Monday, my friend, so you've had plenty of opportunity to try and correct me, and I'm locked in.
Oh
Another
God.
4-0 week. Here we come.
Oh
And up,
God.
forgot Brian Kelly was a coach. Not gonna lie to you.
It's bad luck on all of us. Not just you two. It's a bad luck on all three of us.
Well, go Tigers.
Go
Tigers.
Irish.